You are listening to the One Day at a Time Recovery Podcast. On this podcast, my guests share their stories of alcoholism, addiction, and how they recovered so that you can too. My hope is that you find the inspiration and resources you need to let go of what's holding you back so that you can transform into the person you were always meant to be. Ready? Here we go. Hey friend, thank you for joining me today. So a lot of us have co-occurring issues like my guest, Sarah Benton. She's going to be sharing her story of addiction, workaholism, and the tools and practices she uses to maintain her sobriety, but also a balanced life. Sarah is a licensed counselor and advanced alcohol and drug counselor. She is co-owner and founder of BBHC, where she supports innovative behavioral health companies in clinical startup and operational growth. Sarah's work has been featured in the New York Times. She was a guest on the Oprah Winfrey Show and has a laundry list of accomplishments befitting a true overachiever. Workaholism is something that doesn't get a lot of negative attention. Rather, it's something that's often celebrated in our hustle culture society. But it can be just as devastating because of how it depletes us emotionally, physically, and spiritually, and how it affects our families. Today, Sarah is going to share how her high-achieving nature made it easy for her to deny that drinking had become a problem, but ultimately how she used it to her advantage to do the work of recovery. But before we jump into our conversation, let's talk about dry January. If you're on the sober side of social media, you will have seen all kinds of people talking about it, myself included. I actually created a free guide with some of my best tips for staying sober. You can get a copy by visiting soberlifeschool.com. If you enter your email, I will also add you to the bi-weekly, semi-occasional, sporadic newsletter, where I share some of the resources I personally use for meditation, education, and personal development. After all, I am a self-proclaimed self-help junkie of sorts, so if you're a seeker like I am, I think you'll enjoy it. And if you find yourself struggling to stay sober, just know I am here for you. I didn't get sober alone, and you don't have to either. Sometimes we all need a little support. If you've been thinking about private one-on-one coaching, you can book a free discovery call to see if coaching is right for you. On the Sober Life School website, there is a link to coaching where you can schedule some time with me. I'm really excited to share this conversation with you, so without further delay, please enjoy this episode with Sarah and let me know what you think. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for joining me.
It is such a pleasure to be here. I'm excited to talk to you.
We're going to have some fun. We met through our mutual friend, Victoria and Dawn Nichols, Dr. Dawn.
Shout out to them.
Yeah, shout out to them right away. And it was so fun to meet you in person. I don't often get to meet my guests in person. So it was so cool to meet you at the She Recovers event in Chicago. That was pretty cool. But I was like, I need to talk to Sarah because you wrote this book, Understanding the High Functioning Alcoholic, Breaking the Cycle and Finding Hope. And I was like, oh, these are my people, the high functioning alcoholics.
They're everywhere.
They're my people because, we get shit done, right? And it's not always obvious, especially in this day and age. Like if you've made it to a certain age and to a certain stage in your career, and it's this paradox of this drinking as a problem, but I'm not powerless because I can get stuff done, right?
Oh, the powerlessness. Oh
yeah. So we'll actually break that whole concept down because there's some programs that talk about 12-step programs talk about powerlessness, and we'll talk about what that really means. But let's start off with a little fun game called a lightning round. I'll just ask you a few little fun warm-up questions to front load the episode with some resources. I always like to find out, when you first got sober, what were the books, or was there a specific book that really helped you early on?
I was reading a lot of spiritual books. I think I was reading them before I got sober because I thought I could fix myself.
God can fix this, right?
Yeah. So I thought a master's degree could fix it. I thought, spiritual practice. I thought meditation, yoga, but just don't stop drinking. So, drinking, a love story, classic, Caroline Knapp. I think for me, it was about trying to find someone like me to identify. I thought I was the only person that actually had accomplished anything and wasn't an alcoholic at the time. And then I went to like meetings in the Boston area, and I realized there's a lot of people that are in recovery in Boston. I thought the whole city was drinking. So yeah, I'd say, her book, Pete Hamill's book, A Drinking Life, I really related to. That was in the beginning. I found other books since, and then I took a break where I couldn't read any quit lit or anything because I was so saturated. And I've switched gears into other topics. But I'd say the spirituality of imperfection was pretty powerful. It's heavy, but it's just about finding spirituality in the mess and not about this perfection model of spirituality that many grew up with through religion and otherwise. So I would say spiritual books also, The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle.
So many good books.
Yeah, so many good ones.
I feel like the high functioning, the alcoholic person or someone struggling with alcohol, those are the books that they're really going to relate to. I noticed throughout your book, you mentioned Carolyn Knapp's story, Drinking a Love Story. What was it about that book that resonated with you?
For me, it was her ability to show the compartmentalization of the high functioning individual. I feel like she mastered that ability to show the different worlds that we live in. And for me, I've started to conceptualize through the years that the higher functioning individuals are able to separate their drinking from their external persona and from things people know about them, possibly family, possibly coworkers. Those that are lower functioning, those worlds collide in a way that is inescapable and unavoidable, and you can't deny it. And so the response to getting sober is different. The response to a person who's higher functioning that's put on a good act is different than those that it was more obvious with.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I think that she was, I also resonated with the fact that she was a writer, that she was well educated. I really struggled in the beginning, quite honestly, with feeling like I was smarter than other alcoholics. I didn't even know what an alcoholic was, really. Like, what makes a person an alcoholic? Like, what is that? And that it has absolutely nothing to do with the outside things. It has nothing to do with any of that. It's your relationship to alcohol or substances.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. That was going to be one of my questions. We'll get into it in just a minute, but I'm curious. You've been sober for a while now. What was your sobriety date?
February 3rd, 2004. It was right after the Janet Jackson Nipplegate debacle.
That's funny. That's how you mark the time.
Well, I remarked it because it was such a big deal and I missed it because I was in a blackout. So it was just, I only got to see
say you missed it.
Well, yeah, it was hard to miss. But there was a big screen at the bar and I totally didn't see it.
That is hilarious. Okay, so you've been sober for quite some time. Do you have like a self-care practice that you do either daily or weekly? What does that look like for you?
Well, it's funny you should ask. I have this idea that I want to do kind of a training around is like soul care versus self-care, and this idea of deepening and it being a lifestyle change. So for me, it's that recovery is a lifestyle, and it's not like I can go just do one thing and I'm good. It's the way in which my life is constructed. So my recovery infiltrates every single aspect of my life, just like my drinking did. And so I would say some of my self-care practice involves, or soul care involves, some form of spirituality or practice. Nothing, it doesn't have to be like insane. I think sometimes we perfectionists are like, well, now I have to do, 2 hours of meditation or nothing, or whatnot. So I would say some form of connection with something outside of myself. And that can be a breath, that can be a meeting, that can be a really good conversation with somebody, that can be being in nature, really huge connector for me. I have to pace my schedule, or I can't go to, if I do, I can't book too many things for myself, or if I do, I need to have a landing pad or a downtime. So downtime, the doing nothing is really huge for me because I'm a doer. And so the undoing is harder. And
Amen to that.
yeah, so I need that downtime usually in the evening. Exercise, but in a form that is appealing, or like yoga, running, things that I'll actually do. But for me, I don't, it's evolved over the past, it's, I think allowing ourselves to have something we once did that now isn't working for us is okay. And so I've had
Yeah.
to shift and change, especially, well, with the pandemic, people's practices changed. And some of the virtual things have been great for me. Like I enjoy a yoga recording and doing it in my bedroom more than I going to a studio now. So that's just, it's a shift. It's okay.
I love how, the self-care practice can, or soul care practice can shift. And I find that if I do a practice, whether it's meditation or journaling or whatever, if I do it for too long, it becomes rote. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, I gotta
Doesn't mean
switch.
anything after.
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything, and it like doesn't really shift my energy. So I think
Mm.
of it as a self-care smorgasbord. There's a million things we could do, but I try to
An
limit the
eclectic
time now.
approach.
Yes, yes, patchwork, if you will.
Yes, the
Otherwise,
patchwork.
yeah. So, but I limit it to a certain amount of time otherwise, because I was for a while, and there are periods of time when it's appropriate where you just need to spend more time on your self-care practice. But I feel like I'm currently shifting gears to sort of like minimizing the self-care practice because it
It
can
can
take.
become a whole. I remember in early recovery thinking, why is this a full-time job? And why? And I'm so tired of thinking about myself and my needs and hearing about myself. Like I can't take it anymore.
Yeah, I'm sick of me. I'm tired of talking
I
about me.
was
How about you
so
talk about me?
bored with myself. I was just like,
Yeah,
oh God. So yeah.
so over it
I
already.
was so over it.
I feel
But it
you,
was
sister.
necessary. Like it's an investment in the beginning. It's a long-term investment, right? If you put the time
Uh-huh.
in the beginning, you don't have to maintain that intense pace. Most people don't, hopefully, with all of the recovery and self-care stuff. You can get into a maintenance mode. I hope that for myself and for people in my life that they get to, and then you have something happen in your life and you beef it up, right? Like it's the ebb and the
Yeah.
flow.
Yeah, I feel like that's why it's nice to have like a mentor or an accountability partner or a coach or a friend, somebody that can, you can run stuff by and
Yeah.
they can offer suggestions like how much time are you spending on your self-care practice?
You're now addicted to self-care. It's like Fight Club. Like you just
Oh yeah,
can't
listen.
stop going.
Victoria and I are working on this project called the Self-Help Junkie podcast because it's about it's for those of us who are just like addicted to self-help books and practices and
That's
for
so
the
funny.
love of
I
God.
had to stop like reading self-help. Yeah, like
Yeah.
I started needing to read about other people's lives in a sense and get out of my own.
Yeah, that's why I feel like that's why we need each other because it's nice to be able to listen to somebody else. It does give me a
Mm.
break from thinking about my theme song, which is me, 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 me. Anyway, that's enough for our little lightning round. I really want to know kind of how we got here. You're a high functioning, hard charging, accomplished woman. I remember when we first had our conversation, you were telling me all the stuff that that you're working on, that you had done, and I was like, I'm exhausted just listening to
Me
all the
too.
things that all your things, so many things. Okay, so for those of you who are listening to the podcast, not watching me on YouTube, I'm holding up a copy of your book, and it has all these little sticky notes. So we're definitely gonna go through the book and talk about, what a high functioning alcoholic is. And, some of the identifiers, which I thought were brilliant in the book. And, we're obviously going to talk about the solutions, but kind of how did we get here? Like, how old were you when you started drinking?
Well, I can tell you that I got here from a lot of drinking, so that
Yeah.
but I was 14 when I started drinking and I never drank normally. I don't I didn't, I've heard a million. I'm an addiction specialist therapist, right? So I hear a million stories. I've gone through recovery myself. I'm married to somebody in recovery. Like my entire life is recovery stories, and I just did there. I don't think there was a progression. I feel like oddly, from the first time I drank, I remember walking into the party. I remember the island in the middle and walking up and just taking shots of hard alcohol, like 9 shots, and like falling on the ground in like 15 minutes, just getting like just falling from it hitting
Wow.
me, and then standing back up, and then just walking around the party like in a haze. And I think I got sick that time, but quite honestly, that's not really part of my story. It's like I think my body accepted alcohol a little bit too easily, and
Do you know why you had that reaction?
to drink so much at that time.
Yeah, like you kind of hit the ground running. I had that same
I don't
experience.
know. I've listen, I think I went everyone, therapists try to figure themselves out and their family out first, I think, before they start analyzing everybody else. I have been searching for a reason for my alcoholism for so long, and I finally well, I realized quite a few years ago that it's because I do believe, and there is an alcoholism gene. I wasn't aware of my family history the way that I am today, but part of the gene, it's a GABA receptor gene. And what it does is it affects the way that your mind or your brain receives alcohol. So if you notice when you're watching certain people drink, that are normal drinkers, they'll get relaxed and they'll kind of not turn into another person. They take a sip and they just, I don't know, they just get cozy. You know what I mean?
Be
And for
relaxed.
me, I got like a fire under my ass. Like I literally would have drink, it would give me energy, which is completely opposite. It's a central nervous system depressant. So that's completely peculiar. And I got a euphoric feeling. The more and more I drank, the better and better I would feel until I would black out. And I believe that is the way my brain received alcohol from the beginning. I don't have a crazy trauma story. Quite honestly, I have at times felt like I wasn't messed up enough to be in self-help meetings, or to
Mm.
be an alcoholic, or that I didn't qualify, that people were going to tell me you're not actually that bad, you're not bad enough, you need to like leave the meeting. So that's
I'm
been,
sorry. Did you just say someone told you you weren't bad enough and you
no,
needed to
I
leave?
felt feared people were going to
Oh,
say.
geez. Did you see my claws about to come out?
No, I was
I was like,
afraid that someone was
what?
going to say that to me
Oh,
because
you were afraid.
I
Yeah.
heard these stories that were so wild, or these horrible upbringings and all this, and I don't have that kind of story. Like we all have our family stuff, but like I'm an only child, like I had two loving parents, like I don't know it. So when you ask the question, like why did I walk into the party and slam, I didn't even see that role modeled in my house. I don't know. I would take wine coolers and pour vodka in them because I didn't think they were going to be strong enough. That was just my gut instinct, and I don't know where it came from. I
Mm.
wasn't really trying to escape much. I loved my life and I was pretty happy. So what in the heck?
Amazing.
It
Yeah.
was just strange. But I once, I would swear it off from like, I'm not going to drink for a month, or I would do things like that. But I was so attracted to that, um, almost like shooting off into outer space and coming back down.
Mhm.
There was something about that allowed me to conform to society and do well in school. And it was like the yin to my yang kind of.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I think if we had more time, I'd want to know a little more about like what you would consider to be trauma or not trauma, or, I always feel like childhood kind of sets the stage for the
Yeah.
rest. And I sort of have this working, and I guess it doesn't work for everybody, but this sort of working idea that the drinking behavior is a compulsion to, like, I feel like the purpose of obsession is distraction. Addiction is like about, obsession, and it's distracting us from what? It's like the not good enough. I don't feel comfortable in my own skin, or there was some pain that I dissociated from. Because a lot of people are like, "Oh, I didn't have any trauma," and then we dig in, and it's like, "Excuse me, but that is
I mean,
trauma."
I guess okay, so I had stricter parents, and I don't like being controlled, and I'm a Virgo double Scorpio, so if that says anything, it's not I don't do
I'm a
well with
Scorpio.
I
Yeah.
don't do well with control. And so again, you can label it however you want. I did not like having things on the stricter side. I thought I knew better, and I was very independent, and I thought I could handle myself and all of that. So I would say part of my drinking was teenage rebellion, um,
Right. Yeah.
but it never ended, right? So I drank from 14 to 27. Like, I was living on my own. I didn't have anybody parenting, like, I didn't have rule. Like, once I left for college at 17, I didn't really have those rules.
Oh,
So
that's early. Did you graduate high school early?
I was young. I was like young in my class for the cutoff. So by the time
Oh, okay.
I landed in college, I was 17 and then turned 18, like, while on campus. So yeah, I was young, and I still drank the same way. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, so it was, I think I think all people with substance use issues have this really extraness to them, where if they don't channel it properly, it can go haywire. And
Yes.
I've always loved life and wanted to get the most out of it and have the coolest experiences. And drinking was part of that for me,
Yeah.
taking life to the next level. And so maybe, getting sober, writing, like, my brain is just on, it's just I have an active brain, and some people, it's their bodies. They want to run marathons, and right? Like, different
Yeah.
people do different things in recovery, but I've seen such amazing, brilliant people get sober and channel it properly, or into
Yeah.
healthy things, and accomplish so much, so much. And
Yeah.
I'm grateful to channel it, but I didn't want to. I wanted to keep drinking.
Yeah. Yeah. The disease of more.
Yeah.
That was definitely my experience. As soon as I started drinking or using, my next immediate impulse was more, just more.
I just would look forward. Yeah, I was a binge drinker. So right when it ended, I would have to deal with my hangovers and then clear up and then look forward. I was just always looking forward to that reward.
Yeah, definitely.
I had to do my homework, and I had to get my stuff done. Or
So you were so productive, and you write in your book about, getting through college, and like your early drinking experiences and getting through college and all that. What was it that made you decide that you needed to stop drinking?
um that was actually a culmination of 4 years, starting from the age of 23 to 27. So it certainly wasn't an aha moment. I
Yeah,
think I had some along the way. And if you read, I have my journal entries in the book, you
so
can
good.
see
Yeah.
that I had some aha moments along the way, and then I would just ignore them and just keep drinking. Um, so when I was 23, I went out for my birthday, and I didn't remember half the night, and I woke up the next day, and I remember thinking, gosh, you're 23, and this is still happening. Like, you're drinking like you did, as a teenager. And nothing's changed. And I got a little freaked out. Like, I thought this is a thing you just outgrow, right? And so for my birthday, and I write in my journal that this is the gift to myself, I'm going to stop drinking for 6 months. And so I did that. And I think because I was able to do things like that, other people would then not think I was alcoholic because I could stop. I knew I was going to drink again, right? So stopping for a period of time and stopping indefinitely are two different ball games in our brain.
Yeah.
Hence the name of your podcast.
Yeah, one day at a time. Yeah. Yeah,
So
no, there's quitting drinking and then there's staying stopped.
right. And I could quit, but I couldn't stay stopped. And so, exactly. And so, anyway, that started my journey into 101 ways to try to control my drinking, which, if you need to spend 4 years trying to control your drinking, you might want to look at that. Just note to
Yeah.
self. And it was pretty absurd, the things I did. I would exercise before I went out. I would drink water. I would drink beer because I hated beer. So that didn't work, because then I'd get buzzed and start doing shots. So I tried all these different things during that 4 year period. I also went to I moved, of course, because geographic cures cure
Yeah.
everything. I moved from Los Angeles to Nantucket, not a good move to stay sober. And I then moved to Boston, and I got my master's degree during that time. So again, it's all these things that subconsciously to try to fix myself. I went to a moderation management therapist because I heard about it in graduate school. And I thought this person is going to fix me, you know. And that was very helpful because it showed me that I couldn't stick to that menu for $1 million.
Yeah.
I just kept watching myself lie about having 3 drinks. Like, it was wild to just see that data in front of me. So it was 4 years of this. I mean, getting to the point where I was meditating. I would do like listen to guided meditations before I went out. And my friend walked in and said, "What are you doing?" And I was like, I'm I'm meditating, I'm connecting to my higher power. I wasn't in any kind of recovery or anything. Because it's going to help me stay connected to that so I don't black out. And she was like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And I was like, "You just don't understand my connection, you know, like, like you don't understand." So
So
yeah, so I went out
condescending.
that night and I didn't understand either and I blacked out. So um yeah, so my last night drinking, my soul couldn't handle anymore. I am a blackout drinker that wakes up, doesn't know where I am, doesn't know what I said or did for half the night usually. And I've hurt people, I've hurt myself. I couldn't predict it was a crapshoot, like what was going to happen to me. And I liked the risk, but at the same time, some part of me knew that I could die or that I'd never be able to get married. Or like when I played my life for it, I was like, how could I maintain a normal life and just drink and wake up in weird places? And like, how is that going to work? Like there was a just like there was a my values and my behavior, like there was a what's the word, cognitive dissonance between my behaviors and like what I wanted for my life. And that last Super Bowl night, I had already done the moderation thing. I was like, I'm only gonna have 3 drinks, and I walked around in a blackout saying I'd only had 3 drinks, but they were pint glasses, and it was a whole joke. And I blacked out and woke up, you know, somewhere in Boston. And I was like, I just remember looking at the ceiling, like, I never want to feel this way again. I knew everyone was pissed at me. My phone was off. I did the walk of shame back on the T. That was wonderful in the subway. And I had 2 friends approach me that morning. And it was just this God thing where I had already in my heart come to that, and like my soul come to that conclusion that morning, that I never ever 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 want to feel this way again, and know my friends are upset at me, and know that I acted against my own morals and values. Um and then they articulated those things out loud to me at the very moment I needed to hear them. So, and nobody had talked to me. And I think that's the thing with high functioning individuals is like, because you do well, you show up to work, and because you do well in school, and because you're charismatic, and because of all these qualities that a lot of high functioning people seem to possess, people are kind of don't know what to do with you, right? You're not like intervention level, you know, like, I mean, you are, but in people's minds, they don't know what to make of you.
Yeah, you're not portraying the typical
No,
person that you see that are really just blowing their lives up.
no, because work is the last to go. That is the deal. No matter what, we will show up. No matter what. I'm not going out till my homework's done. I'm not going out before I have a test the next morning. Like, I could control when I went out or when I drank, but I couldn't control how much I drank.
There
And
it is.
so that was the only bit of control that I had.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's confusing because if you're a binge drinker, not a daily drinker,
So confusing.
yeah, it's very confusing.
And everybody else is
And so
confused.
how, and everyone else is confused. Yeah. So, and I think so tell me what was your process for quitting drinking?
My
Did you do like a
process
12-step program or?
Well, my process was to be my own case manager and put together an outpatient recovery plan.
The curse of
My
education.
process was to avoid residential treatment because I
Mm,
wasn't really that much of an alcoholic. So
mhm.
I went to a physician like that right after the next day. Then I talked to my doctor for whatever I'm not going to get into, and he said, Sarah, I mean, I said one word actually. This is where people that are physicians or anybody in the healthcare or mental health field, they have such power to, like, their words. If they minimize your problem, they can send people back out. I've seen it happen. But when they say the right thing and do the right thing, they can save lives. And
Mhm.
I said one thing to him. He was an older person too. Like, I said something about I blacked out, and he was like, "Oh, how often do you black out?" And I'm like, "Well, every time I drink, like, duh." And he was like, "That's all I said." And he was like, Sarah, you have way too much to offer this world to let alcohol get in the way." And he sent me to the addiction psychiatry unit at the hospital to get assessed because I'd already tried moderation management. So I got an assessment. So I kind of went the clinical route. Like, I
Mhm.
went in, got assessed, and they told me, and I loved the woman that assessed me. I ended up doing her women's early recovery group in person. It was
Hmm.
wonderful. And I needed that because I I needed someone to vet people that I was in a group with and kind of know that it would be like the right fit. But she said, you've
Mhm.
tried moderation. She's like, you probably need to go the abstinence route, and you can do it outpatient. But if you can't do it outpatient, then you need to go away to treatment. And I was like, treatment? That is for real alcoholics. Like, that is so crazy and out there. What are you talking about? So I put together this whole plan. Like, looking back on it, I can't believe I did it, but it's really, anyone that knows me is probably not surprised. But so I had once a week therapy, once once a week women's early sobriety group, yoga, acupuncture, and self-help meetings. And
Self-help meetings like 12 step.
yes,
Okay.
and I also did other things. Like, I tried through the years, I've tried different types of self-help.
Mhm.
Um, my whole thing is you have to do what's the right fit for you.
For
Um,
sure.
and also spice it up because sometimes, like, it can get so rote.
Yes.
And so that was it. I had this like kind of outpatient plan that I put together for myself, and it was a lot of work. Like, I had a lot of I had a lot of post-acute withdrawal symptoms. Oddly, I was not physically dependent on alcohol. I did not feel very well for 4 years.
Wow.
I had stomach issues. I had anxiety I had to deal with. I had I did not have a pink cloud. I was in conflicts with friends because I was setting limits and I wasn't fun anymore. And
Wow.
nothing was really going that well except that I was not drinking.
Yeah.
So that sucked. And it was not reinforcing. And I stuck with it, and it because I knew it was a long-term investment.
Is
But
that why you stuck with it? Because you had sort of this forward thinking of like, I don't want to go back to the old way, and this is a long-term investment.
yes, I think ultimately acceptance was the answer to all of my problems. And for me, a deep acceptance that I had this condition helped me to know I'd never drink normally again. So this
Yeah.
deep understanding, like around 11 months, I finally was able to internalize the fact that I was an alcoholic. It took me some time. I was certainly confused. I was sitting in meetings listening to these wild stories. Mine was just, I mean, my blackout stories are like, some of them are funny and wild and crazy, but there was other pieces of my life that was so contained. And so I really struggled to like identify. And I heard this woman say at a conference, kind of like we were at a conference. She said, only an alcoholic thinks they need to hit a lower bottom to be an alcoholic. And I remember being like, shit, that's it. Like, I keep thinking
Yeah.
I've got a few more years left in me. Like, and like, why do I need to actually fuck my life up? Right. Like, do I
Right.
need like to actually have a tragedy, or do I, like, it was there, but for the grace of God that I had things happen, but nothing tragic to that level. And like, was I needing that? And
Right. Yeah.
so I played it forward, and that deep acceptance that I had, that I was an alcoholic, is part of what helped me. Because when my brain, the addictive brain will tell you all these wild things, like, 90% of me accepted that I was an alcoholic, and 10% was like the part of me that's sick. And we all have that, like that disease part. And when people would say things like, Sarah, you're not that bad, or Sarah, you don't really need those meetings. Those people are really fucked up. You're not that fucked up. Like when people, you don't look like an alcoholic. Like this is the shit people would say to me.
I know.
That part of my brain would flare up, that 10%, and it would start to like infringe on my like 90% knowing. And that was something I started to figure out, that was happening. And I could see it. And something I work on with clients too is like seeing that experience of what's happening in our minds and not getting sucked into it, the bullshit, right? And into the lies. So that acceptance that I'm an alcoholic, like if I have diabetes or I have cancer, I do the treatment. I know that I cannot drink in safety, period. End of story. I can shades of gray it 100 ways till Sunday, but the point is it's a black and white issue. And obviously God, higher power, universe, whatever, my spiritual beliefs helped get me through and connected me to the people I needed at those times and gave me that wisdom. But bottom line is, some of it was I had to just sit there in that acceptance, even though I was pissed.
Listen, that's not a conclusion we come to joyfully, typically.
It really wasn't. It was really a bummer. Okay. It was really a bummer.
I know.
I was like, wait a second. If I'm an alcoholic, that means I can't drink. What?
Everybody goes, oh, that means I can't drink at my wedding. I remember thinking that, telling that to somebody, and this lady
Hello,
was like,
do you?
This lady was like, do you have a boyfriend? I was like, no. She's like, what are you worried about?
Are you looking forward to that party?
One day.
And then I had friends saying, oh gosh, you're going to like do something horrible on your wedding, like at your wedding. Like I had friends predicting my nightmare.
Jeez, thanks. I mean, it's so funny how our friends can see things. Yeah,
they were
can see things we can't. Yeah, that's
I got blackout drunk on my wedding night. I don't know that marriage would have lasted very long.
Yeah, seriously. Okay, so you go through the whole process, you do all the things. By the way, I love your plan, and I feel like everybody has to have that treatment plan. Like some people just go full on, 12-step, and that's their whole plan, which includes like a lot of these things.
I've always been into the patchwork.
Yeah.
I've always been into the like keep it balanced. And I think people that get so hot and heavy with their self-help meetings and groups, I think for some people they need that. I think for me, I was trying to be moderate. I was trying to do things in moderation, right?
Recovery is the only thing I ever did in moderation.
Yeah, like I was trying to be moderate, man. Like, why do I have to get so crazy? And so I realized when I needed to beef stuff up, and I got honest with myself, and maybe you need more meetings, or maybe you need this, or maybe that, or but I was pretty good at like knowing when I needed to self-correct.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's probably a unique experience to the high functioning people, like that whole category.
I do actually think it is a little bit of a trait, because there are people that go into recovery that don't know how to actually live their lives. I've treated those clients, like they don't have a rhythm. They don't know when they should be getting up, going to bed, getting to work, right? Like they can't regulate. Higher functioning individuals, they've got sort of the life skills part down.
Yeah.
Right. But they really need to fine tune what they define as self-care, right? Like how is self-care poisoning yourself? Right. Like that's really bonkers, right?
There's the dissonance that we were talking about. I'm trying to find the characteristics. Let's sort of talk. I kind of want to talk. Thank you so much for sharing all that. Super. I mean, listen, I feel like it's the stories, like people identify through the stories. And I think people are going to
narratives are powerful.
Yeah, they're going to people that, these high functioning people are really going to resonate with your story. But I love this part in your book where you sort of outline characteristics of high functioning alcoholics. We're talking about denial, and you give some examples, having difficulty viewing themselves as alcoholics because they don't fit into the stereotypical image. We talked about that. Believe that they are not alcoholics because their lives are still manageable or successful, and that is really relating to work, right?
It is, and it can also be a relationship. Like I had a ton of friends,
yeah,
and that felt functional.
Yeah,
right. Like when people say powerless unmanageability, I know in 12-step programs, it's very hard when you feel that your life is manageable You can maybe say, yeah, I'm powerless when I start drinking, thing like that. But the manageability is a huge part of the battle with high functioning people is, but my life's
Yeah.
manageable. Look how well I'm doing. But here's the question, right? Is when you're drinking, is your life, when you're actually under the influences, are things manageable? That's really what helped me, right? Like not in
Yeah.
between. When you're actually under the influence.
This is the thing that this is the drum I'm always beating. When people are like, "Oh, but I'm not powerless," and I says it, and I'm like, "It says over alcohol, right?" And I
Yeah.
would argue over alcohol. Like, don't just stop. I mean, anyway, so that's
Love
number
that.
one. That's the
Thank
context.
you.
It's over alcohol, and I would argue that everyone is powerless over alcohol in the sense that when someone ingests alcohol, there is a chemical, physical, biological reaction that happens to everyone,
Yep.
right? Which is, it affects your brain in a certain way. It's both fat soluble and water soluble. So it seeps into every single cell of your body. And
Literally.
so yeah, and it literally changes how you think and how you feel, which is why we drink in the first place, right?
Mhm.
So my argument is everyone's powerless over it. That's a choosing to drink or not is kind of the question,
That
which
was the only choice I had,
yeah,
right? It's
yeah.
whether or not I picked up. But once all bets were off,
All
once
bets right. Started. Girl, as you were telling your story, I was like, check, waking up in strange places, blacking out. Oh yeah, day
I
one.
could have really used like some GPS back then.
I know, seriously. Oh my God. Yeah, in 94, I got sober in 94, there was nothing.
Nada.
I got sober before social media.
I don't know where I am. I'm like walking, looking at street signs, like, awful. I mean, I make light of it, but it is pretty. I have a dark sense of
Scary.
humor. I'm sorry.
No, no, clearly we're friends. The other one is a double life. So we appear on the outside to the outside world to be managing life well, skilled at living compartmental
Mm.
lives, set up lifestyles in such a way that negative feedback from others can be avoided. I mean, these are avoiding appearances. I mean, these are all, anyway, there's 2 pages of this that I was like, check, check,
This was
check.
based on, a ton of interviews with people that were in recovery that were identifying as high functioning. So it was really helpful to get to see those patterns emerge, right? I was essentially profiling, right? Like people knew, I've heard of what a high functioning alcoholic is or a high functioning person with substance use disorder. Like people had heard the term, but it was trying to get to the bottom of like what is the profile of this individual and how do we treat them, right? Like how do we tailor care? I mean, we're hard to treat. We'll out talk the therapist.
Yeah.
Like it's
You
awful.
mentioned financial status, legal
Yeah.
matters hitting bottom. It's like, yeah, you can pay your bills and you have,
And you pay people off so you don't get DUIs because your parents know everybody in town. Like, I don't know. I mean, that doesn't
oh,
mean you don't have a
yeah,
problem, but these are the things that happen, right?
yeah,
Is that invincibility complex because you were born into wealth or because you have a job that affords you a good, the finances are a protectant shield with substances. Like when you watch these even shows, you can see even on TV, right? When there's wealthy people, it's like pouring Miracle Grow on the addiction, but it also is a buffer from reality.
yeah, it really is. Like I've interviewed professional athletes who at a young age were getting into some serious trouble, but the, local town sheriff, called mom
Yes.
and dad instead because this kid had so much talent they didn't want.
To ruin his career.
Or hurt his chances of going to college or
Right.
all that stuff. And I see that. Oh, I saw, you know what? I used to work in court. I'm from Silicon Valley, and so I was working in high tech. And I remember the VPs, sitting, I used to sit right across from a VP, and I remember they were kind of gathering around telling stories about a guy who was clearly an alcoholic and how they would try to coach him on how to talk to HR or so that because he was a really good sales guy, right? He
Exactly.
was,
They don't want to lose money. So there's sick family systems, but there's also sick corporate systems, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I,
And
I saw
enabling
those
that goes
guys.
on. Yeah, secondary denial, like things that go on in corp. This is the other part of it, right? Is that people struggle. with their company either acknowledging or they're admitting to a company, or the company wanting to let this person take a month off. I mean, there's all these reasons why a person who's a high achiever is having a harder time getting help. And some of it is because people just don't think it's that bad.
Or they have an invested interest in them not changing or
Yeah,
disappearing. Yeah, it's really kind of gross, honestly.
it
Um,
is.
s-
But it's
yeah.
it's I think the more we talk about it, the more people can start to see, like, the just because you dress it up, and this is like Weekend at Bernie's at a certain point, right? Like, I mean, just because you dress somebody up and carry them
It's so
around,
sad.
and like,
Yeah.
it really, it's sad. And I've seen people do it with their children and just keep throwing money at them, and they have a nice car and they're employed by their family, and they keep
Right.
relapsing, but they still have a nice car and they dress well, and they haven't, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like dressing up the illness.
Yeah, I feel like family enablement is really a whole entire other ball of wax, especially if you're the
Another
provider for
podcast.
yeah, I mean, that's that we could really go down a rabbit hole with that one just because there's a lot of misinformation about how families can help. I just did an episode on that one, but there's ways that people can help and ways that they can hurt.
Yeah.
Um, so that happens in corporate too with a high functioning person.
Oh,
There's some people who there's some corporations who really do care and they have programs and things like that.
yeah.
But yeah, that's a big one. Let's talk a little bit about what actually does help. I thought it was funny, like in your book at page 99, Past to Sobriety, there's different. I was like 99 problems. Yeah, 99 problems, not a mentioning one.
That's it.
Um, this bitch was the problem, I'll tell you
Yeah,
that.
that's but these bitches were the problem. We just
I mean,
didn't
these bitches were the
think so.
problem. But on page 99, we're talking about paths to sobriety. So we talked a little bit how you had like that you did kind of the patchwork recovery. I did too. As soon as my world opened, it was like they say rocketed into the fourth dimension. It's like once
Mm,
you realize, I did like a Tony Robbins thing where I was introduced to the idea that if I changed my mind, I could change my life. Right. And that was
mm,
appealing to me because it didn't include spirituality. I'd kind of, me and God broke up a long time ago. And so I eventually found my way back to something that made sense to me. But I was really intrigued by this idea that if I changed my mind, I could change my life. So that's when I went down
mm.
the self-help,
I love
rabbit
that.
hole.
Move a muscle,
But
change a thought.
yeah, but I think that's why I was able to receive the messages and 12-step programs and stuff that really helped me. But then this whole other world opened up to me. And, I started doing stuff like A Course in Miracles and reading all these spiritual books that really helped. Can we just go through some of the other, you mentioned you mentioned Smart Recovery and several others. What are some of the other
Sure.
options you've seen work?
Well, there's more now than when I wrote the book. I mean, I think that's what's interesting is, silver linings of the pandemic is that online self-help groups they're giving more access to people to join in meetings that are not necessarily local. So
Mhm.
yeah, of course, there's 12 steps. Probably the largest participation, largest number of people supported is 12 step. I think that's just
The
a,
peer support group.
yeah, that's just a fact. I mean, that's just a fact of numbers, and people can do 12 steps and other things. Smart Recovery is a CBT based cognitive behavioral therapy skill based group, and it's time limited. People don't necessarily do like lifetime membership in that sense. So I've had clients even that have like done 12 steps, then they've like dipped into Smart, got some skills, but they really love the fellowship in 12 steps. So there's not one way to do it. Dharma recovery, Buddhist based recovery, that there's a meditation and then a topic and people talk. There's recovery yoga. There's um, She Recovers, which is recovery from all conditions. So it's the meetings aren't just about substances. And they're, again, because of this virtual world opening, people have access at their fingertips to all these different types of meetings. There's Women for Sobriety, which was an offshoot of 12 step, but like their spiritual component. Celebrate Recovery, Christian based organization. So there's just so many, and I just think it's important for people to find what's going to like resonate with them. I mean,
Mhm.
that's the bottom line.
Yeah, there's so many options available. I think once you kind of come to the conclusion of answering the question, whether you can moderate or not, like I really
Yeah.
feel like that's the big question. And then once
Right.
you
And there's groups
decide,
that are helping people for sober curious. Like there's certainly groups that have been helping people with that decision-making process and that kind of discussions online. I'm a little less familiar with those programs because I do deal more with abstinence-based treatment, but again, you have to get to a place of like I had my process, right? Moderation management, that therapist that applied that protocol with me was helpful in me realizing I couldn't do it.
right?
Like it wasn't
Yeah.
successful. It
I
was
like
successful because I wasn't successful.
well, because you came to a conclusion,
Yeah, it helped me
a
to have
clear,
the
honest conclusion.
data
Yeah,
gathering.
I noticed that in your book that you had the log, the moderation log. That was really, I was like, whoa, that's genius.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I did all that, you know. I
yeah,
really practiced what I preached in that area, and it really helped me to see myself lying about the amount of, you know, I'd be allotted 8 drinks in a week, and I'd do it all in one night, and then say, "Oh, but I didn't black out," and isn't that an improvement? And the therapist,
yeah.
they're like this with their glasses,
Dude,
and a notepad, like, "You do realize you drank the whole week's allotment in one night," and I was like, "Yeah, but I didn't black
oh,
out," you know. Progress, not perfection.
yeah, that's not how that works. No, I liked the log because I mean you can actually apply that to stuff like you know, as we sit here today, we're in the middle of December, so everyone's going to be looking forward to January, like what habits they want to change. And you know, sugar is always on my list. But it's like you know, applying the principle of the log. It's like here are my rules, here are my moderation rules. And then you do the log, and then you have actual empirical
There was, I
data.
mean, for me, it was like I could see it in writing. I had to bring it into somebody. It took me months after that to really absorb the fact that I failed.
That you
But
came to a
it
positive
finally
conclusion.
hit me. Yeah, I finally came to a conclusion that I failed, even though I like fired her first.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it really stuck with me, like
Yeah.
that the evidence. So yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's like I offer different pathways in my book and also in my trainings and such because I truly believe that social support is so imperative to recovery
Huge.
that I really don't care how you get it. Like, please let it not be like, you know, like totally like not, you know, just out there. But the point is hearing the narrative, connecting with people, knowing you're not alone was what saved all of us. I mean,
Yeah.
like I know people that got sober on their own and stuff, but I mean, that's the rare bird.
Yeah, and it's so funny because I have interviewed people who got sober, quote unquote, on their own. And
Mm.
then, you know, it's like I asked the question, what would you tell your, you know, what would you tell your newly so, you know, looking back, if you could talk to your brand new sober self, what would you tell them? And it's like, and it's almost always like, get help sooner.
Mm.
Like, find your sober tribe sooner. Don't do this alone. You don't have to. It's way harder that way, and you don't have to. But I think I almost feel like people have to kind of come to that conclusion on their own.
That having your own experience is big. All we can do is share our experiences, hope people, you know, it resonates and then they're like, oh, maybe I could try it this way or short circuit this. But the truth is we can't save people from themselves. And I, you know,
Mm.
as a therapist and I've worked with recovery coaches and I hear all the time, I just want to save people from the 10 extra years of suffering I had. And it's like we can't sometimes, you know, like people have to have their
If they
process.
don't
I
want
do
to.
believe in
Yeah.
interventions. I do believe in, you know, that you can speed the process up, but ultimately people have to have their own experience.
Yeah. I feel like being really ready and willing is really important. And I find that, you know, what really has really come clear for me is that there are people who really do want to and can't. And those are the people that have the unresolved trauma. And that's
Mhm.
my message of compassion is that don't be so hard on yourself. People who continually relapse are often shamed. It's like, oh, you must not want it enough, or you must not have
Yes.
hit bottom enough. And I'm like, no, that's not it. There's unresolved trauma that they're
It's a
not
it's
even
a clinical
connected to.
nightmare for me when I hear that. I
Yeah.
cringe because, you know, dual diagnosis is real, co-occurring disorders are real, and um when you get sober, you're left with those underlying, you know, mental health conditions or
Yeah.
trauma symptoms. And I've had to deal with my own more around anxiety. And I didn't, I had to deal with it more. What's I wasn't it's kind of complicated. I didn't know that I had an anxiety disorder until I got sober. I wasn't self-medicating per se. Like, it just, my nervous system got really sensitive after. And so I work with clients that have or have through the years like dual diagnosis. And if you don't treat both conditions, it puts you at jeopardy for a relapse, and it also
Yeah.
worsens your quality of life. Like, when you're trying to treat the mental health condition, you're not actually treating it when you're self-medicating. So it's complicated. And I think we have to have compassion for people that have more acute underlying co-occurring issues, because some people get sober and feel wonderful, and some people get sober and are suffering. They're truly suffering. And so
Yeah.
it's easy to say, you're not trying hard enough, but no, they need the right care.
Yeah, those messages are coming from people that are, like in the peer support programs, people that are
Yes.
Uneducated, they're not professionals.
Yes.
And I just feel like it's such a cruel thing to say to somebody.
It's awful. And it's my battle cry, please don't talk to people about their meds, about their outside issues. Like, stick to the substance talk and let the
Yeah.
professionals do the rest, please.
Yeah, even I'll even go on record as saying, if you go to the AA.org website, there's pamphlet number 11 that talks about dealing with medications and
Medication, other
basically,
drugs. It's like my favorite pamphlet.
yeah. I mean, they typically say that they don't have a position on it. It's between you, your doctor, your sponsor, your higher power, whatever. But
So wonderful. Literature is important. Go to the literature of these programs and see what their stances are. Get to the root. I mean, literature, there is very clear-cut literature.
Yeah, it's the people that are the problem.
The people, it's the game of telephone that is the problem.
Yes, ma'am. Well, listen, you and I obviously we're going to have more conversations. I know you have another book coming out. I'll have you back for that. But where can people find you if they want to know how they can work with you or find more on your programs? What's a good place to send people?
So I'm currently reconstructing my website, which is bentonbhc.com, Benton Behavioral Health Consulting. So it's bentonbhc.com. And I am launching Benton Behavioral Health Academy soon, where I will have, my first topic is actually going to be on understanding and treating high functioning clients with substance use disorder. So that is going to be my first topic, but they're going to be CEUs for professionals eventually once I get that certification through. But
wow, that's
they're going to
great.
initially start off as, courses that people can take 1 hour long snippets on topics that I feel are unique, self-care, burnout prevention, compassion fatigue, integrated treatment with 12 steps in clinical model, high functioning alcoholic topics, shame resiliency, like just stuff that I don't hear as much talk about. So that's my goal, is to have unique topics. So that will
I love how these are focused, on the high functioning people.
Yes, and on clinicians. Also going to be, I also, so I have some new
Which
things.
are the ones who are high functioning.
Exactly. They're over functioning and now they're burnt out.
Yes.
Yes. So
Awesome.
so that's probably the best way. My books, that book's available on Amazon, and
I'll leave a link.
And I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, Sarah Allen Benton, and Facebook.
Did you say fake book?
Facebook, but yeah, fake.
Oh, I thought you said fake book.
That could have been a Freudian slip, but no.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. All right. Well, listen, I will leave link for those that are listening. I'll leave links to all the things in the show notes at odatchet.com so you can connect with Sarah. But Sarah, thank you so much for your time today. It's super helpful. I have so many little sound bites that I was able to that I'm going to use for video stuff. So that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
We'll talk again soon.
Okay. Bye.
One last thing before you go, if you enjoyed the podcast today, please don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher and leave a review. And if you'd like to make a donation to the podcast and help me keep the lights on, you can do so by visiting odatchat.com. There's a donation button or membership button on the right-hand side. Have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us.